Hello and welcome back to Indiepocalypse Radio. I'm your host, Andrew. Oh, no, damn it, that's not the order again. Welcome to Indiepocalypse Radio. You're the midpoint between an interview and a post-con hangout. I'm Andrew. I'm the host of the show. I think people write these things down and that's how they get them off like perfectly. But I guess it doesn't matter really. I just want some structure to begin with, some cohesion. But I got it. So this is, it's, if you're unfamiliar, it's a show where I come and I talk to mostly developers, but, people around the greater games or greater art world. We are here with a pair of developers today, and they're from, included in the Indiepocalypse collection. Oh, they're in the same issue even, I think. Did I get that right? Let me see if I got that right, if I just copied one of them and then did not properly attribute. We'll see that in a second. But we have here our first guest, as I double check, and I think I'm right. Where are you? Our first guest from issue. Okay, see I screwed it up. That's what I did. Is it 54? What do you remember? No, it's 55. Yeah. It's 55.
55. Yeah.
From issue 55 of Indiepocalypse Correspondence, it's Brendan Allen. Brendan, how are you doing today?
Hello. I'm doing well. I have been sick all weekend, but you're catching me on the upswing. So
oh, yes, I've been
very happy to be here.
I've been. We're alluding to sickness also within the pre-show. I actually have not been meaningfully sick for like 5 years. As it turns out, increased safety precautions around sickness work for all illness.
Yeah, absolutely.
And in the worst way, developing a culture of not going around and getting people sick has been a long time coming for at least the US of A where I am at. Not sure where you were at, but
no, I'm very recently in Canada, but I was in the U. I'm from the US, and so I'm familiar.
Yeah, and I feel like Canada's probably not too different than us in that regard. I feel like they do not have probably have a similar culture with regards to, I'm just a little sick, I'm going to cough and sneeze in public all the time.
Yeah, US has a lot of just open sneezing, which is, I mean, masks are great. I wish like they caught on a bit more after the like heavy heydays of the pandemic. I was feeling a little crummy, and now I have a mask on. So
I see a non-zero number of them, which is a million
it's percent improvement,
a million percent increase over 2019.
Mm-hmm.
Which is infinitely beneficial. But that all aside, I got to ask the important lead-off question that I ask always to get a bit of info for myself, which is, Brandon, how did you hear about Indiepocalypse?
Yeah, I think I was actually trying to think about this pre-show, and I realized I didn't have a good answer. I think in part because getting started on publishing some games on itch.io, it just sort of felt like Indiepocalypse was like always there in some little window or periphery space, and that like I have this very strong memory of that design that is the like kind of version of the like the Super Mario World map version of Indiepocalypse. Like that image, I feel like was just like everywhere across itch.io as I was like exploring making games at the very start, and then so I don't think I can trace it to a particular moment, but just very much like in the water of itch.io.
That's it's something I've been thinking about more recently because there was like a recent game. So I feel like when they mentioned working like the developer, I think in was it the README or where was it? I think it might have been in the README, or it could have been like at the end of the game. it might have been at the end of the game, but they mentioned like starting on the game when they were like 12 or something, or having the kernels of making games.
Yeah.
And there's the realization that it's like, oh right, yeah, when you do it for like 5 years, you increasingly approach the having always existed like territory, in people's brains.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's like asking, hey, how'd you hear about Netflix?
Yeah, it's like, oh, I don't know. I went outside once.
right, which is
yeah.
is good for me because I mean that question is largely how do I ensure that people continue to hear about it so they'll continue submitting their games, which is the thing I think about the most, as it's the unexpected financial hardship aside, it is the one weakness of Indiepocalypse is there being no games. But speaking of games, having made one, tell, if people are unfamiliar, what is correspondence?
Yeah, correspondence is I think of it as like a pseudo puzzle game, and that's not really a puzzle, but it's made in puzzle script.
Right.
And it's a game about how the experience of an email inbox is just kind of this never-ending Sisyphean experience of just as soon as you think you've like resolved all of these people wanting your attention, more and more stuff comes in. So it's a little puzzle script game. It's very short. It's like a 5-minute experience, if that. Yeah, it's meant. I think of it more as like a game poem, even than like a I don't know, a full-fledged game, because it's meant to be like kind of a quick experience. And
then there's the important question of what is a game, and it is wide spreading, and I'm generally of it's kind of whatever, a game is it's too loose a term. We there need to be more terms. There's too many. It's too broad a term to define, all the things that fall within the realm of games. So,
yeah, that's something I'm thinking a lot about right now. In fact, so part of the reason why I'm even in Canada is that I'm doing this PhD program that I've just started, where like the focus, at least at present, is going to be on like how and why people are calling the game and game-like things they make, calling them by what they call them. Like to call something a game versus a game poem versus a serious game or an anti-game or a non-game. I feel like there's all these like ways in which people are crafting more and more genres to kind of like wiggle out what their games are.
Right. Whatever combinations of words that clarify this is not a game where a little guy runs around and gets points.
Right. Or if you get points, the points are like, they're not normal points. They're weird points.
Right. They're more conceptual versions of points. Than like a number goes high and I feel good because my number went really high. But it does feel good when your number goes high sometimes,
It does, yeah.
It's like, oh wow, that thing went really high up, or it's like I have all the things. I no longer need to collect any things. I have everything. But yeah, no, it is a like I feel like even the kind of the realm of games like studies and game studies programs and games programs in general themselves are relatively new. Like I feel like game development programs are probably like maybe a couple decades old, if that.
Yeah, I think maybe a decade. Maybe
right,
a bit more,
right.
But I think it's very weird because I think a lot of them are like super professionalization oriented, where it's like, they're like recruiting students in this like, do you like to play games? Well, if you like Halo, you're gonna love making $1 million making video games. And then students enroll in these courses, and then they're like, wait a second, I can't
Right.
just make $1 million instantly.
Right. It's kind of like a funnel into the industry funnel of
Yeah,
a pipeline from, well, because it's also like a very very company based arts industry, which feels, I mean, I am not deep into other industries, but feels more anomalous for the arts to be so like company driven.
yeah. There's a really excellent book by, I think it's, I never know how to say his last name.
Okay, so I know. Yeah, I know. I know exactly what you're talking about because I know.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's like the video game industry does not exist or something.
Yes.
And I feel like he talks a lot about that in the Australian context of, yeah, you've got this one impulse of just funneling new talent into these very industry oriented, company driven things, but then there's all kinds of people on the fringes and like in their free time and around the spaces making stuff like I feel like we see a lot in Indiepocalypse.
Right. I was talking, and like it's weird how the sort of hobbyist space and the more like non-commercial space gets ignored, even when it is like super influential. We were. I was talking, a couple of weeks ago. I was obsessed about that. I get very obsessed with that GQ list because I think it's such a perfect encapsulation of the view of the video game industry. If you want to like understand like why it's like you can think it's like mainstream press and game culture is boring, you can just point at that list and be like, look at their games. They think Breath of the Wild is the greatest game of all time. But
I actually didn't even know GQ put out a games list. That's
well,
wow.
They didn't. It was like, well, they did, but it was one of those aggregate polls of like, I think like critics and developers and things like that. And it mostly just sticks in my brain because it came out around the same time the Sight and Sound poll came out, which caused a big stink because it veered so strongly from the conventions of like Vertigo and Citizen Kane that usually peaks it that year. So it caused a big kerfuffle of like, what is this Belgian nonsense?
Yeah.
But we were talking. I was thinking about, and we were talking about how like that list, for instance, doesn't have like Yume Nikki on it, which is probably one of like the largest, most influential games that probably has ever existed. And
I think a lot about there's like in terms of these lists really, I don't know, they so frequently trend towards, and maybe it's by nature of like just doing large general polls, like trending towards games that have major marketing pushes just because they tend they're more present in popular memory.
Right. It's like a lot of like focus on like commercial footprints of things.
Yeah.
Other than like 90 the if you remove all the kind of like how do you politely call them, trash on itch of these sort of like, oh, this is my first game, I don't know what games are, I'm or like I'm trying to think of like the because there's probably a lot of detritus on there that is like re-uploads of other people's stuff and like asset flip stuff and just trying to sneak one by. But like how much of percentage of that is like of itch games you think like Yume Nikki is in the bones of compared to like how many of them do you think about Mass Effect?
Yeah, that's sorry. I guess I didn't clarify at the start that correspondence is just an extension of the Mass Effect
Oh, okay.
narrative universe.
I think I see.
It's
The thing is, I didn't think I think I must have might have like been able to like clock the icons in the background as
yeah, it's a very niche reference to, some of the deepest and darkest Mass
the
Effect plot
Citadel
lines.
web or whatever. I forgot. I didn't recognize
Yeah,
that was a Citadel web browser.
yeah.
But it is like it's like an interesting space that games are in. I think like as research has like academia for one is often kind of like sequestered off into its own little zone. And sometimes on occasion will peek outside of it, but
Mhm.
because I feel like that middle ground, whether people and there are people who want to do it, but also it's hard to get paid to do that, and then you also need to get money to survive. So
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was really because I'm frankly like I'm very new to making games.
right,
In that I was in terms of creative work, like mostly working as a poet, and I still write poetry, but um, I think the first game that I ever made is this game called Cento Quest. That's just it's a twine game, and it's a pretty simple twine game. There's
right,
not a lot of like deeply nested functionality, but I remember just getting started with it and um, having this like realization for like it was the third night in a row that I was up till 4 in the morning, just like nudging these little things around within the system and being like, oh wow, like the amount of time it takes to make things like this
yeah,
is just so much larger than I had any concept of until now. And
right, like
the thought of someone making a game in their free time, like if you're someone who's like making art in the like hour you have after your work shift before you need to go to bed so you can be up to be at work the next day, like the progress on a game is going to be so slow and incremental.
right. That's why like that. I mean, and that is like the benefit of sort of like pre-built sort of like minimalist engines like Puzzle Script
Hmm.
is
Hmm.
that like a lot of that work is like the technical work. Like imagine how
Right.
fast games go if you don't have to worry about any of the technical work of like does it work? When my
Yeah.
guy jumps, does he land and not jump infinitely or
Yeah.
fall through the
Yeah.
floor?
Absolutely. And even then, even within those systems that have so much of that like pre-designed and solidified for you, there's
Yeah,
still so. I mean, making correspondence was just this real real experience of like I thought I had everything, and then I pressed a button, and like six different things shifted in a way I had no idea could happen. What have
right.
I done?
But there's that's the benefit of having like like sometimes not even being aware of your full tool set and having a limited tool
Yeah.
set is that you don't like have when you don't have infinity you don't have to worry about it. You can
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
you
Constraint. I think constraint is super valuable for making a lot of art, but it seems for me especially helpful for making games.
now I maybe I just missed this initially, and I can't click it to um, because of my the way I'm rewriting audio right now. It just simply will not
Hmm.
load. But this thing you have here under loose experiments, um,
Oh,
it
oh, loose experience on my itch.io
yes,
profile. Yeah.
yes. This John Galt game here is this what I think it is, in that it is those videos that people submitted for the DVD.
Yeah, the videos where people go like, "I am John Galt."
Yes, and they've got like a big binder and they're on a train track.
Yes,
Okay,
absolutely. So it's I that thing, uh, and it's like totally broken at this point because
right.
it's just it's made like trash. But basically, yeah, I realized a couple of years ago that YouTube was just full of all these people, and it must have been for some, I don't know, like Atlas Shrugged movie or
Oh yes,
something.
okay.
But
So you,
just
yeah, it is. It is. There is like there was. It was the second one. Like the first one got like a major studio-ish release, I think, and then the second one less so. And this was like for like a DVD like special feature. So that's why there are like 80 million videos of
okay.
people going, "I am John Galt."
Yeah, well, it's yeah, okay, that helps. Even I don't even know necessarily some of the original context, but I just
Yes.
found them so funny because
Yes. No.
they're like these 3 to 4 second clips, and you get so little context, but like it's just like a dude on the street. It's like a woman in the middle of a house party. It's like someone with their Second Life avatar,
Yeah.
and uh I'm like, I find that stuff so silly to start with. And then I was like, well, what happens if using an incredibly bad like YouTube video embed in my HTML code, I just put as many on the page as I can and loop them. And so that like basically you like click one and it starts looping and then it plays again and again and again. And then I realized that once you have like more than 6 of them going because of how poorly optimized the system is, your computer just really starts to slow down. and
Right. So much for the free market.
I know, right?
But no, yeah, okay, that was what I was hoping it was. Because I am intermittently obsessed with those videos.
Yeah.
Because
Well, I'd recommend only clicking about 4 or 5 at a time because it
yes,
does. I have had a computer crash from
and
trying to make this
then I would recommend you, dear listener, in your free time, just go through a bunch of them. They're like it's like little snapshots of, it's almost like character work. You get these little snapshots and you feel like you, in like these 3 seconds, you kind of understand a person.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They're very excited about contributing to the John Galt phenomenon.
Yes,
Um,
of the mythos of, he does
yeah,
what, like builds a railroad, I think. He's got a big binder and builds a railroad, I think. Something like that.
yeah,
Unfamiliar with Atlas Shrugged.
yeah. That's,
Uh,
I think, fine.
I think I'll go my whole life and never read it and probably be fine with that in my life.
hmm
There's infinite work. That's the thing I say about art is, there was already too much of it, like before video games were even invented,
hmm
to experience in one lifetime. So hey, don't worry about it.
Yeah, I mean, um, it's really amazing to be on like the number of hours I've just spent like on itch.io, just basically lost in the whole of wow, like there's so many of these like little things that are being made every single day,
Yeah,
and even this is just such a sliver. Like I think about, I don't know, I grew up playing a lot of like being in like elementary school and going to the computer lab and playing every terribly made, flash game imaginable.
right.
And I think of how many of those things are also just, they don't even exist anymore, and yet there's just hundreds of hours of like art labor that went into those things that are just um, almost just like have evaporated from any amount of contact.
Yeah, we did not have also, like, I think the same broader cultural context to think of those as being, indie games. Uh,
Right, right.
and probably because maybe the term indie game wasn't as, couldn't commercialize it as well. So the term did
Yeah.
not exist in people's brains. But that's what they always were. And a lot of those, plenty of people that are around now started in Flash, making Flash games.
Yeah, I think of like everything coming from like, what is it, like the Behemoth that
Right,
like,
right. That's a whole ass company. Like,
yeah, yeah, and it was like Tom Fultz making his like weird Pico shooter game thing that then turned into a huge
right,
contemporary indie phenomenon. Yeah,
right. And now they're just, granted they also run Newgrounds,
sure.
which
Yeah,
helps.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, it is like, and the thing I keep thinking about, and this is something that their account got deleted, so I can't look up the exact phrasing, but it's something that like UbuWeb said a while ago on Twitter, and it was like, the internet actually hasn't changed. It hasn't no, like the old internet actually has not gone away. We have just been like shepherded away from it. Like you can do things the same. You really nothing's stopping you from going to websites and like, you know, bookmarking people's websites and viewing them that way and doing that sort of stuff. It's just everyone's been corralled into, you know, Twitter and social media and everything.
I feel like my brain has now been hardwired in a way that prevents me from doing that. Like I think it's so I've been like just fully. There are these moments where I sit down at the computer and I can remember being much younger and having this sense of like, wow, there's so many pathways at my fingertips to like find exciting things in this network. And now in my like, you know, a decade and a half later, it's like, well, I see these like 3 big highways that lead me to like Instagram and Twitter and Reddit and
Right.
aside from that, I don't know how to merge off of this thing anymore.
Oh, it's just merge free, just travel around. And it's like, oh, I didn't realize that UbuWeb is no longer active. I mean, everything's still up there. The archive is there, but it is no longer adding to the archive. As of the beginning of this year. I missed that. Oh well. Anyway, it's a cool website. I recommend it. It's got a bunch of cool stuff on it.
Oh, actually, UbiWeb also has, they've got some really excellent poetry resources too.
Yeah. Right, because that is like these resources are like kind of what keep things alive.
Right.
And also like talking about them.
Right.
But speaking of talking about things, Brandon, we've talked about a lot of things. We're approaching the end of our segment, so I've got 2 important questions for you.
Of course, yeah.
First off, what's your favorite type of rock?
Favorite type? It'd be like the kind of just, you know, like perfectly oval, smooth shaped, where you're like, man, I really want to throw this and skip it in a lake.
Yeah.
But my like crow part of my brain is like, keep it, just keep it.
Perfect. And follow-up question, or not follow-up question, secondary question. Do you have a favorite Toho character?
I don't think I have a favorite Toho character.
Too many to choose from?
Let me refresh myself.
Okay.
About Toho characters.
Of course, you know them all off the top of your head, and you're just having such difficulty.
Yeah, it's just I'm running through the real. There's so many Toho characters that I love and know the names of.
Yes. And you could say them all, but then that would make choosing one of them even harder, I'm sure.
Yeah, there's Jessica and...
Oh. You don't have to... Listen, you don't have to lie to me, Brennan.
You're just experiencing someone who is familiar with this word and has reached a Google image search that has just basically overwhelmed me with just millions of what look like small magical girls just swarming across my screen.
A lot of yokai in there. Fairies, spirits, vampires, shrine maidens.
Yeah.
That's why it's a do, though. You're not required to have. The first question you are required to answer. That is non-optional.
Okay.
The second question is an optional question. And
I think I see someone with orange hair and horizontal horns, and like she looks pretty cool. So
perfect. I will log that for you.
Thanks. Please don't come after me, internet, for not having a favorite Toho character.
Well, you can learn, of course, when you log on, when you tune into the Indiepocalypse Pledge Drive in January and join Toho 101 course that I'll be running, and that all the guests up to this point who are like, I didn't know what that is. Like, you can get a quick primer.
I would love to get Toho certified. That would be great.
Well, it would be Toho cert. Like I said, it's a 101. It's not like a 301 or anything. It's just a 101. So you want to be certified or anything, you still got to do your regular course, your 4-year course load in your gen eds to be truly like Toho certified. But I'll minor. I'll do a Toho minor. Okay, that's and you can always just like do some like some clep tests to catch up on it.
Yeah.
Play some Death Smiles or whatever. To kind of get a little bits and pieces of it. But Brandon, thank you for joining me here today.
Of course, thank you for having me. It's been it's really an honor to be included in Indiepocalypse, and it's a major pleasure to join you here.
I'm glad to have you here. The thing does not work without the people being inside of it. Well, we're going to go on break, and we'll be back in roughly 2 minutes and 6 seconds, approximately. Goodbye for now. Hello, welcome back to Indiepocalypse Radio. That was, of course, Mission of Burma. That's how I escaped my certain fate. I've been thinking a lot about that because one of those guys was in like Alloy Orchestra. I've been thinking a lot about the Man with the Movie Camera. But that all aside, we are here with the next guest, who you may know. This guest, actually from issue 51 of Indiepocalypse, not like the other guests where I said they were from that. I'm like, where's my little form? With the Eurovania 3 Circle of the Polycule, it's Paige Ashland. Paige, how you doing today?
Hi, I'm doing really good. I was sick most of the week, and I'm starting to feel better. So
yes, we've got a double sicko show today. Not the hat trick. I feel like I mentioned in the first segment. I'm feeling strong and healthy and undefeatable, as I have been.
The secret.
Yeah, as I've been for the last 5 years almost, aside from like 3 days. Which is, the secret is wear a mask when you're sick and don't get people sick. You know what? Even better, if you're sick, just don't go outside. Don't go see other people. It's the perfect solution to not getting people sick. Especially don't go to giant events if you're sick. It seems like a bad option, but that is. And it's weird because I've done like events too, and I've never even gotten sick off. I didn't get sick. I don't think doing those generally too much, but I haven't even gotten sick at all. Post like not even classic con crud,
Yeah, so I went to a con for the first time since the pandemic a few months ago, and it was like everyone was wearing a mask, and I washed my hands constantly, and I didn't get con crud, and I was like, I could get used to this life.
Yeah, right. I've even gone where not everyone is wearing them, and it's giant anime conventions.
Right.
So I like to think that in my brain, in my heart, I like to think that people who do feel a little sick are wearing them, or just not going, and that is my explanation. But let's no need to dwell on illness forever. First off, I need to know, how did you hear about Indiepocalypse?
So there's sort of a two-part answer, because I actually think I remember seeing the tweet where you originally announced it, like what feels like forever ago.
Oh, back in January 2020. Not to dwell on illness.
Wow, okay. That's not as long ago as I would have thought, but and then I'd much more recently just in some little communities that I'm in, Discords or people in real life, a bunch of people had just recommended their experience like submitting. So I was like, well, maybe I should do that. I had this idea that it wasn't for me, so I reached out to you on co-host and was like, I don't know, is this for me? And you were like, yeah.
Yeah, no, it is. Now, as someone who's worried that it might not have been you, do you know why that is? Do you like, or is it just like general artist anxiety?
Like, I just had like, I guess in my head I had like negative associations with like the old Indiepocalypse discourse, like.
Oh, yes.
But then once I sort of realized this isn't about that.
No, it's almost a tongue-in-cheek response to that very notion.
Right.
Yeah, no, it is. I don't know how I stumbled upon the name, honestly. If someone had to ask me.
Sorry, I kept interrupting you.
No.
I feel like, independent of that discourse, it's a really good name for a zine.
Yes.
It's a classic zine name, right? Like, yeah.
Yeah, I think it had to have been like the notion that they were like, oh, there's too many games in the world, and I'm like, let me make a thing where I constantly give you games and call it that thing.
Yeah, because that was part of my reaction is people, it's like, oh, there's too much art, and now we're all going to die.
Yes, and then, but as I said in the first segment, before games existed, there was already too much art.
Right. Yeah, I was listening and I completely.
Yeah.
I agree.
Right. So like, game developers were 2 decades behind. Gilgamesh was already kicking your ass.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you can't top Gilgamesh.
Right.
I actually talk about that with one of my partners all the time. Like.
It I think about that sort of thing. I was because I was looking up the specifics around the classic poem Ozymandias, and there's like on the Wikipedia page there's a screen, like a capture, a scan of like the newspaper that it was in. And I think, like, man, imagine just like picking up and reading a newspaper and it's like Ozymandias is in it, and then people are talking about it like 100 years later, and like.
That's wild. I didn't know it was originally in a newspaper. I feel like newspapers were a different thing at that time.
I mean, I don't know the context of the newspaper, like what kind of stuff they're reporting on. The Ripper strikes again, as they say.
Right.
Spring Heel Jack's at it again, they say in their newspaper. But yeah, no, it's just like it says original poem Ozymandias on page 24 of the Examiner.
Wow.
In 1818. And then it looks like it's next to like what's the word for an article when it's like a continuation of an article from like a front page? Is there a word for that specifically?
I think there is. I actually used to work at a newspaper, but I can't tell you.
Right.
I can't remember.
but it's next to one of those. Like, mm-hmm. It looks like the half finished part of another thing, and it's just like, oh yeah, they're like art like has like, and I think probably because games. I think about this because games got it worse than maybe other mediums where they think art progresses linearly. Right. And go, oh look, these games are better than these other ones because they're like they're newer.
Right. They're newer and they have more pixels in them.
Right. Right. So they're better. People have learned important lessons or whatever. That's why I think historically nobody performs Shakespeare anymore because he's just too old.
Yes. Right. I mean, you couldn't relate to those characters anymore. And,
right.
They just don't look very good on today's high definition screens.
Yeah, we have Rent now. Like players have progressed so much since then. There wasn't even any singing in Shakespeare. Seems like an oversight.
It didn't follow three-act structure. They really didn't even know what a play was back then.
Right. It was all written as really like awkward like meter. Like, I don't know. I don't know about this whole like this staged thing. I'm not sure how long it'll last. But speaking of games and pixel counts, your game is one of those games with those lower pixel counts, those inferior old games, as they call them.
Yeah.
If people are unfamiliar, what is Eurevania 3?
So, Eurevania 3 was actually the fourth game in a series, because I did a prequel. Basically, it's a game exploring, or attempting to explore, through narrative and mechanics, like what's involved in getting a whole group of long-distance partners together. And but it's also told through the lens of, it's very much the idea of the series is you are playing as the characters that would be the enemies in a Castlevania game. Because I really like the sort of pop horror that Castlevania does.
Yeah.
But like in virtually every, like no matter the medium, no matter the individual piece of art, in virtually everything where it's like a hero versus a monster, I almost always identify with the monster. So this is a castle full of monsters, and they just happen to all be gay ladies, and some of them are dating a lot of people at once.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, right.
It's for... Oh, sorry. Yeah, it's thinking of the pixels, it's for the old Game Boy Color, and part of that is because I hadn't done art in a really long time when I started making these games.
Right.
So I figured I was going to start very constrained, 4 colors, very low resolution, even by the standards of the day. And that's helped me so much in learning how to make things look like things again.
yes, there is like, you could do a lot with, very little. And I think about, because I think it's a very cool book, I think a lot about that FF Dot book, because it has like the really lavish like illustrations, and then like the tiny little NES pixels or sprites they make out of it, and you go, oh, I see it all, and they like convey all the ideas into like these like 32 by 32 sprites.
To me, that's a huge part of the appeal of pixel art, is
Yeah.
how do you say a lot with like one square with one color?
Right.
So sometimes I'll see people online posting their pixel art, and I'm like, you use too many colors. And
Yeah.
like, they may have a beautiful piece, but it's missing part of what I want out of the pixel art experience.
I remember realizing that as like or learning that rather at a young age from like Simpsons commentary, where they were talking about I believe it was the episode. If I think about this too much, I'm like I can allude to it, but like no, I know exactly. It's the episode where the PTA disbands, so the school gets canceled, and Bart's outside flying his kite, and they were talking about how like 2 or 3 lines suddenly make the character model look very tired, and like right, like because you can do a lot with like art, like representative art in animation does not take very much to like change what it means. But it also means you have to be like super attuned to like being able to work in these ultra tiny details of things. Yeah,
it's definitely a skill, and it's one that I'm only at the beginnings of learning.
Yeah, and that like it's you see it in like industry wide of like sprite art from the beginning of a console to the end of a console, or like I think Capcom's like last hurrah of 2D I think is a great example of those last 2D Street Fighters and like Breath of Fire are like truly like gorgeous pixel art games.
Yeah. And you make a good point that there's a lot of similar things in sort of the simpler end of pictorial art, because I remember also, before I'd ever thought about this in the context of video games, like old comics like Calvin and Hobbes or
Yeah.
The Adventures of Tintin, they have these very, very simple faces that are just a few lines, but so much character and emotion is communicated in those few lines.
Yeah. So, somewhere Scott McCloud is very excited. He's thrilled right now, but it is, there is like, and I think there is like important things that games can pick up from like mediums like comics or like animation, and going like, well, how do they do it?
Right.
Like they're working in a similar like thing. And it's like I can't make 30 character sprites, but I can make like 2 character sprites with 30 faces or whatever.
Right.
And kind of like those things, like even sometimes a character having multiple, like, a character having multiple portraits can go like a long way to conveying different ideas.
Yes, definitely. I mean, I think like a lot of visual novels, that's exactly where they put all of their money, right? Is in just the expressions on the characters. Like the bodies don't change, or they barely change, and the backgrounds. I mean, there's some high budget ones where everything looks gorgeous. But there's a lot of them where you can see all of the time went into the expressions, because that's what people are mostly focused on while you're in the story.
Yeah, and you like the minor changes between them. And sorry, I was looking at your page and I got a wild throwback to forever ago, and looking at Long Story.
Oh,
Yeah.
That's awesome that you even know about Long Story.
I tabled next to Long Story at TCAF probably around 2018 or 2017. Pre even doing Indiepocalypse stuff.
So Long Story has a special place in my heart because I was a fan of the game, and then I met the team at a conference and was like, I'm such a big fan of your game. And they were like, oh, well, we need a programmer. You want to come work for us?
Oh.
I was like, well, actually, I have a job right now, but think of me in the future. And like a year later, when my contract was up, I wrote to them, was like, do you still need a programmer? And they're like, yes, we do. Then I ended up working with them for like 2 years, so that was a great experience.
Yeah, there is. And that's like, that is also like the benefits of, for better or worse, like conferences and like events, and like the sort of like curse of online that I think about all the time is that you can, in being in person, flatten social standings in a lot of ways. Where it's easier to ignore someone asking, "Oh, I love your game. I'm a programmer. I like it." When you have when you're a 2-follower user on Twitter, versus a human being right in front of them.
Right. No, I really agree, and a huge part of it, like you say, is that we don't yet all walk around with a bubble above our heads.
Yes.
The numeric of how popular we are, but also there's just so much you can get out of a face-to-face conversation that you don't have in just plain text.
Yeah.
And I love communicating in plain text, don't get me wrong, but there are certain kinds of connecting with people that it's really hard to do. Without, like we were talking about, facial expressions and things like that.
Yeah, it's part of why I do this show is I am bad with even my decade-long friends. We have our private channel and I use it pretty much never. I will often think of something to say and go, I'll wait till we meet up in person, and then I'll save I'll save the thought for then. And the reason I have this show is I could communicate with plenty of people across text, but I like to even the first time meeting someone, it's a weird thing where hearing your voices helps me contextualize text later in a way. You pick up on someone's tone through how they talk more than how they type in the same way.
Yeah, I really feel that. Once I know someone's voice, then that's the voice I read their text in.
Right. Yeah, there's also that of like you're like, oh, I get the tone of like how this person is like expressing something.
Right,
And
how they would have said that, yeah.
yeah, and it goes like a long way, I think, in like it's why there's it's the misery of games being kind of like split up so far, and they're not being like there's not that many like indie shows for games really.
Right.
Like I say, as I think SPX is happening like this weekend maybe, or close to it, and that's even like a bigger one. Oh yeah, it's happening right now.
And that's part of the trouble, like you say, is like there's like indie and there's indie and there's indie.
Yes.
Like a lot of the stuff that even is focused on indie, it's only interested in the stuff near the top.
Right.
Like even something like Indiecade that is trying to be very avant-garde, they're like, yes, but we want the popular avant-garde. You know?
Yes, right. or it is you, or it goes in like ebbs and flows of like, you know, I think about the IGF, and the IGF was like,
right.
Oh, do I need to like have $3 million and be published by Finji to be in the IGF? Not Caro Nuovo, of course. But I feel like, you know, in the last year, so like some of that Nuovo stuff started to creep into the you know, bleed over into the other categories, where that is like, when I think of independent games, I think of that category primarily.
Right. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Rather than like, you know, I guess if you make a game for $2 million or $4 million, I guess that's indie in some, because you didn't publish it under EA or something.
Right.
But is there like a yearly check-in with publishers that we have to like check of like we have to check in with Devolver every year to see how much money they make to determine whether they're still indie or not? Being published by Devolver is still indie?
Well, it reminds me of back in the aughts, I just spent all of my time around like musicians.
Yeah.
And I listened to a lot of like underground bands that were not on, you know, one of the big labels, but none of them were called indie. You know, like basically every goth band, with the exception of maybe 4 that's ever been, has been independent because big labels don't publish goth, right?
Right.
But when you say indie rock, you're not thinking goth, you know, and that's true. That's like you're not thinking IDM. You're not thinking like so many different music genres, and I feel like games has that same problem, only even worse.
Yeah.
Because like at least people in the aughts had a vague idea of what indie meant for music, and I feel like we don't even have that sort of vague agreement in games. Like, yeah, so it's a tricky term. Like, I kind of, what I've been gravitating toward myself recently is describing myself as like a bedroom dev.
Yeah.
Which I picked up from music because there's people online where they're like, well, I'm a bedroom musician.
Yeah.
And I feel like that better represents like, yes, I don't have a contract with a big publisher, but actually it's just me in my bedroom making this game by myself with some help from my friends and maybe once in a while someone that I can contract if I have a little money.
Yeah. I tried that term. I tried that term on a couple times because a friend similarly, he's like, "Oh yeah, you should try the term bedroom, like bedroom dev." I you know, I go to like the old standby of like alternative, you know.
Yeah, no, that's also really good. Like alt games.
Yeah,
I feel that too.
There's so many, and you know, it's just like find the one that sticks until it gets co-opted by someone with $4 million.
Right. When EA is releasing their latest bedroom dev game. Right.
And it's like, oh, it feels like a bedroom dev game because it has pixels in it.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
It's like, yeah, no, my indie game that I paid $100,000 to play a trailer for, and I'm like,
right,
brother, give me $100,000. That's what I want. How do I get $100,000? What a scam. How do I run that scam? How do my parents like run IMAX? How do I get that to happen?
Right. Yes. Exactly.
How do I become a nepo baby late in life?
Hi, Mom. I just realized what's wrong with my career. Can you be really, really rich?
Mom, I checked on the internet. It turns out you don't have a Wikipedia page. Can you get on that? I'm really trying to get my career off the ground. You're right. Or also, I've been saying all partners that facilitate 7-year-long development cycles by working real jobs should get executive producer credits on all games.
Yes.
But maybe we should go to the parents too. The parents who gave them their, oh yeah, sure, you don't have to work a job. Here's a $50,000 nest egg or whatever.
Right.
Just another assumed, because that's the other weird thing, the more unspoken thing about art in general. I think probably that people forget about is the person that lets them do that, that by working a job every day.
Yes, absolutely.
I
really feel that very strongly. And something that's similar to that I also feel very strongly.
Yeah.
I forget who said this. It was a long time ago now, but somebody was saying online at some point that like there's this question like who works on the game gets to be called a developer, and this person was saying everybody who contributes to its shipping should be called a developer. Like if the janitor who works in the building at EA, they should be in the credits. They should be a game developer. And like I feel that so strongly because like whether it's a big game or a small game, there's so much work that goes into it that doesn't get glamorized. And, I've worked in office buildings. If you didn't have those janitors, they wouldn't get shit done there.
Yes. Right. And this is a field where basically where it's like already none of it gets really like glamorized. Right. How many people can name like level designers like they can name like producers or like film editors,
Right. No, that's a really excellent point too, because like I do enjoy film, but I'm way more into games than I am into film.
Right.
Yet I'm sure I know the names of many more film people than I know games people. That at least that was definitely true before I became a game developer.
Right.
Yeah.
But then you start to know them as like almost like peers more than you know them as like you're not learning them because it's like part of like, oh yeah, I'm big into this art, so I know DPs and I know editors and I know cinematographers and I know oh yeah such and such produced this album and this album and this album. Like, oh yeah, I know this person is a level designer because I know this person.
Right, exactly. Like how many people, like so many people who are into games know who Shigeru Miyamoto is. Right. But how many people could name one other person that he worked with on any game?
Right. Yeah.
And like he did not make any of those games on his own. Like.
Yeah, that is. It's a thing that like, but a thing he also probably does have like very like consistent like team members and collaborators probably.
Right. Yeah.
Because like, it's why I always bristle when people talk about like auteur stuff in games. Mm-hmm. Because for one, it doesn't feel like games really have that many like what that would be considered auteurs like. Mm-hmm. Like very distinct voices,
right?
But also like if like even like from the core where it's most used of film, like if auteurs, like they all have like they are not solo. Like they're actors that they like. They're
right.
You would like. Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, yeah, they work with the same cinematographer over and over. They work
Right.
with the same editor over and over. Right.
And usually the people who like auteurs, I would say, to make broad assumptions, of course, but I assume they also know these people. They don't go, oh yes, I love how David Lynch makes all those movies by himself.
By himself, yeah.
Right? No.
Yeah.
They probably
Yeah,
recognize
like
Harry
that.
Dean Stanton showing up constantly, and they're like, oh, that's his favorite. That's one of his favorite guys. And there's the recognition of their guys, and like
Yeah, totally.
the kind of like implicitness of like knowing that there are larger teams involved. But we're getting in the weeds of this. But speaking of in the weeds of these, both the weeds themselves and the arts in general, and the music referenced earlier, Paige, what's your favorite type of rock?
Okay, so it's kind of a hard question for me because I like a lot of different rocks in different ways.
Okay.
I'm gonna go with Onyx. I really like Onyx, and especially because I feel like people typically when they think of Onyx, they think of really dark black colors.
Yes.
But there's kinds of Onyx that are like bright, like yellows and pinks and greens, and for whatever reason, ever since I was a little kid and I saw my first like brightly colored Onyx, something about it just feels really good to me.
Perfect. Well, and then follow up. Do you have a favorite Toho character?
I do, but it's super basic, and I won't even say her name right.
Okay,
It's,
who?
Flandre Scarlet. I think her visual design is amazing.
Yes. Well, Paige, you're a good company because I am bad at picking favorites in general. I am a general fan of the Scarlet Devil Mansion. It's a cool aesthetic. They're all real cool over there.
Yeah, I agree.
They're all weird and goth and have wings.
So for me, that was partly my introduction to
Yeah.
Toho, so that's probably why it's in a special place in my internet fandom drawer.
But we're not going to go down this giant Toho road for a second. We're going to go on break. Where is my little... There you are. Paige, thank you for joining me here today.
Yeah, thank you.
It's all good.
Hello, welcome back to the show. That was Husker Du with Never Talking to You Again. I thought for a second, I was like, can I swing in a goth band on top of my head? Like I don't know who I'd pick, and all the songs on the album Goths, of course, are too long. I wanted to play Abandoned Flesh, but Abandoned Flesh is too long. But it's fun. Abandoned Flesh, of course, like the song By the Mountain Goats off the album Goths. But we're back with everybody. Hello, everybody. Welcome back.
Hello.
Hello.
We were talking about the beauty of anonymity, to summarize it, I guess, and how I just I go to I like how like, oh, a lot of people recognize me at events, but no one actually recognizes me. People recognize the things on the table in front of me, and they go, wait, are you Andrew? So theoretically, they don't actually know it's even me. I could be someone running the booth for me, so far as they know. It's just the safe assumption that it's me.
That's just, you could keep up the veneer and just be like, oh yeah, I'm one of Andrew's many employees that
Right.
he uses to run Indiepocalypse.
I'm one of Andrew's helpers. I'm your local Andrew. But no, I have to. But enough people know that this is also a one-person operation. As people are like, it's like, oh well, the team, like, nope, there ain't no team here. This is, oh, I wish, but to have a team requires money to pay people, which I do not have. But welcome back to the show, everyone. I have a bunch of windows open. I'm going to close some of these windows. Too many of them. So as we were alluding to games, because it's interesting, an interesting connection. Paige talked about hanging around with music, and Brandy talked about coming from poetry background. I feel like that is increasingly like a thing that is either true or helps, I think, in the indie spaces to be aware that there are other spaces.
Yeah.
And like
Yeah,
how
I mean, certainly for me, I feel like I don't know, anything that I've been working on is informed by so much other media and so many different forms of mediums that I don't think I'd be able to work creatively if I only experienced one type of art or if I only engaged with one medium.
right. Right, and like, and my publishing model is very much borrowed from, like poetry and fiction and things like that, of like the anthology style. Because imagine if you were a poet and everyone had to make an epic poem because those are the only things that sell, because you can't sell individual poems. And like, and then someone's like, oh, what if you just made a lot of poems and released them all in a collection? In like your own collection of poetry, and you're like, that's weird. I just have to make really long poems, and that's how you fill a book full of them. And it is like an odd thing that feels like games for some reason haven't fully caught on with yet. Of you can just publish a bunch of small works and then publish a collection of those small works, like on your own as well.
Yeah, it is. Oh no, please go ahead.
Oh, just that. So this is a thing I would like to see more people do, and this is a thing I would even be interested in seeing big studios do. Because, like, in general, like, I'm not very interested in most big budget games anymore.
Right.
But I bet you they'd get a lot more interesting if they could be like, here's what we feel is $80 worth of game, but there's like 12 games in here.
Right.
20 games.
Yeah, or like here is, you know, like dare they make budget games. It feels like there's got to be some point where it like contracts.
I don't know. I'm pretty excited to start spending $120 on the next Mario game.
Right.
I can see all the bristles on his mustache.
Yeah.
That is definitely improvement. As we mentioned in the previous segment, nobody goes to old art anymore because it's old, and it looks bad now because it's old. No one could ever find stylistic beauty in simple lines. I want to see the pores on Mario's skin. What?
Well, I would, yeah. I mean, Paige, I would love that kind of structure too. Also, from like a time experience. I don't know. I feel like sometimes there are these big budget games that you drop like $60 on and you play and you think, I like this, but also I feel like I understood and got it in about 30 minutes. And this thing has another like 60 hours attached to it. I don't think I need those like 65 hours and 30 minutes. I think like I just needed the core of this thing. And if you had like I wonder what happens if you pour the resources into something of like we're gonna do a series of really good 30-minute games versus one big sprawling thing too.
Yeah, I really, really feel that too, because like I wonder how much of it is just like a historical thing where in the early days of commercial games, almost all of them were very short, and I remember if you're used to games where like the playtime is 5 minutes, then if someone shows up and says, hey, this game, the playtime's 10 minutes, that sounds cool. But when you're at the point where like the playtime is 60 hours and someone's like, I've got one that's 120 hours, I don't know that that's better anymore.
Yeah.
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 You've got to have a heck of a game to be worth 120 of my hours. And I mean, also part of it is that like I used to be a kid and I'm not anymore, and I don't have like 120 hours to kill. Like,
yeah, and there's the ultimate curse of art of something being longer doesn't make it better.
Right.
And you can be like, oh, this thing's 180 hours, so that mean it's 180 times better than this 1 hour thing.
Yes, exactly.
Well, it is. I think about it historically too, because as a kid growing up, I played like so many JRPGs and also read, there was a period of time where I had, RIP, but like 4 different physical video game magazines delivered to my house every month. And I remember the discourse very much being like, oh, this $50 game is worth it because the number of hours that you are getting per dollar on this like 80-hour Final Fantasy game is going to. And in some ways, when you're a kid and you have all that time to spend, you're like, oh yeah, I was entertained for like a month.
Right. My parents can only buy me one video game, and I'm getting the most out of that video game.
Yeah.
Right, and that's especially true because, like you say, a lot of kids have way more time than they have money.
Yeah. And it's and with the advent of like Game Pass sort of stuff, and like, or just like itch in general, like people have like access to like tons and tons and tons of games. Like even growing up, like with the internet, and we mentioned early Newgrounds. We played a lot of Newgrounds games because those were free. You could play.
Right. Yep.
We didn't have to pay money for those games, and we play. I mean, and the true art of the true art that represented, of course, were the Newgrounds games and all the things Kramer was trying to do, of course. But they were there is like a certain I don't know if like people need a single thing to spend all your time, but everybody wants like. It feels like the curse of like people wanting an audience, or like a constant community that you don't know if they really need.
There's also speaking of my game Euryvania 3, I stumbled into what I realize now was kind of a big mistake, which is the game's too long. It came from an honest place. I had these like artistic goals I wanted to do, and they kind of required a long game. But like, I think on a technical level and on an artistic level, it's so much better than any of the prior Euryvanias. And I know it's had a fraction of the players because you can play the early ones in like half an hour, and this one takes 4 hours. And most people who are playing itch games are not going to sign up for a 4-hour experience. Right.
Because they're like, oh, like you're sitting down for 4 hours to do, it's why people, oh, I don't want to watch movies.
Right. Yeah, you could watch a Peter Jackson movie in that amount of time.
Right. They'll be like, oh, I don't want to watch movies. I don't want to have to commit to this. But, it's the same idea of like, I'll play 30 itch games, or I'll watch 15 episodes of a TV show in a row because you're not watching a 4-hour thing. You're watching a 30-minute thing 3 times.
So I'm still glad that I did it for personal reasons, but in any future game, I'm going to be way more careful to make sure it does not go on that long.
Right. Because
I wonder.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, it's just Paige. I wonder if do you know if there's folks who also are downloading the game? Because I wonder how much also the context of it surrounding of. Like, if someone has the itch browser open and they're playing it on their web browser, that might have certain time expectations. But I wonder if you've... Because is yours made in Game Boy Studio? Is that correct?
Yes, yeah, it is, which I super recommend. I'll just plug that real fast. But, so as much as, like, I'm not an expert at metrics, and I know itch doesn't have the world's best metrics, but people are definitely downloading the game. And I do think and hope that, there maybe it has like, as they say, like a longer tail, like some people will go on their I'll play this later list. Yeah. But also almost all of us have a list like that that's like, 60 to 600 games long.
Yeah, so, maybe it's 8,000 games long, you never know.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so whether or not my game rates that highly in someone's estimation, that's kind of a big risk, right? Like if I want someone to play my art, it's way easier to get them to, even if they're downloading it, to play the Game Boy game that's like an hour or 15 minutes.
Right. And that's because it is, you mentioned it's part of that expectation of like, an itch game, quote unquote, is the expectation that, of course these things should be shorter. I just download them off of itch,
Right, like that's what people go to itch for. So like there's plenty of amazing games on itch that are much longer, but like in people's heads, most people, I think, like if they want a long game, they're going to Steam, or they're going to whatever their console shop is.
Right, because that's where the long games are.
Right.
That creates like there's all these different, and all these expectations are all just made up, of course.
Yes. Yeah.
None of them are real. None of them have to do with anything. They're all just things people made up, and it's like, but that's how you get people working on. It's always a very odd thing when I see a game, when I'm doing like my little beginning of month like thumb on the scale and reaching out to devs. I'll look at a game on my list that I added to my list like 10 years ago and see that they're still working on it.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'll see like on their page, I'll say like, oh, Steam release 2024. I was like, 2024? Wait a minute. And I go down to like the publish date for the itch page, and it's like 2014. And of course, like even if the game does well, it'll come out and be like, "Oh, look at this indie game came out of nowhere. It's so cool." And it's like they've been working on that for like 10 years.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It came out of nowhere. Yeah.
Right.
Because then a lot of times those things are those games are also so like they're so small too, in that the really wild compression of the number of hours that someone spent crafting this thing.
Yeah.
To the like maybe 20 minutes a player has of experiencing it before they, maybe it is only 20 minutes long, or maybe they choose to move on from there to something else. But it's so wild to think of like how someone grapples with that major difference in time spent and time played.
Yeah, I think that's the benefit of like, theoretically there being like, oh, we can spin up a team. I know, in the same way, like, oh, let's spin up a band, of people who do certain things. And spin up a team that does certain things, and then I guess maybe filmmaking is more a better analogy, because I think those tend to, like spin up and spin down more than like, albums do, or bands do. But the idea of like, coming and going in the kind of like indie space of like, this would take me a billion years to do by myself, but if I did it with 3 other people and we did this thing, then it would take, I don't know, 2 years, maybe a year, a few months, depending on your scale of things. Like when you add people, stuff like the time compresses so much.
Right. And that makes me think of like there's some people that I think have the whole co-op model down, working really well, like
right.
Stock Pop. Is that the right name?
Yeah, because they work in like shifts, not shifts, but like cycles. Like they do like video game crop rotation or whatever.
And I think that also kind of ties back to earlier in the conversation, that they're one of the few groups where I feel like they do have a very distinctive voice. I really want to see more of that in games. Yeah,
and they have like a reliable a reliable sort of like, hey, here's our model that works. But it's nice if there was like more people that can also do that. Like a Punk Cake started fairly recently, which does a similar thing as well, and have a similar kind of distinct style. And the benefit of those is like sometimes one of those like breaks out, and probably gives them a little more leeway to do the other projects. But having that sustainable, like, oh yeah, we can just do a short number of games, or like a short game every month, and put them out, and they're done, and it works. It's like almost like I think everybody could do it, really.
Maybe tell me if poetry is like this also. I know in music a lot of times there'll be like some innovation in sound, and it's like local to a particular city for a while, and eventually it gets globalized in today's world, but people are still like, oh, that's the Gothenburg sound, that's like the Motown sound. Like, is poetry like that at all? I really would like games to be more like that. I'd love to be able to pick up a game and be like, oh, this was made in Montreal,
Right.
And you can't do that. Like,
yeah, I mean, sort of. I think it's one of those things that also, as just like everything is much more interconnected, that's also lessening a bit. But I think like a lot of the poetry scenes prior to the internet getting super huge, you had the New York school poets, and you had the Bay Area poets, and you had the like, little weirdos in Texas doing their stuff, and then those things like turned into like whole styles and schools that then had multiple generations, and now they're kind of I don't know. I think the field of contemporary poetry is very it's very mixed up in that like people are aware of some of those influences, but they're getting constantly like recombined and shifted and adjusted, and but it would be I don't know. I think with poetry you've also got like cultural spaces where you have it really rooted in like local community and local practitioners, and then you've got the other side of it that's very rooted in academic spaces, because it's like much like fiction writing. It's gotten really like the programs for masters in fine arts in poetry and fiction have just exploded, because they're sometimes good moneymakers for English departments. And so then you have like it's kind of become like, oh, I can see that this person clearly went to this program where they studied with this particular poet, and that's why all their stuff seems to kind of look and sound like that faculty member at that institution or something.
that's really interesting.
Which I don't know. I don't know anything about like game design programs.
Right.
I don't know if that's also something that carries forward there.
Like, I mean, definitely in my experience, I pick up on like, you can kind of start to clock that NYU flavor,
That's true.
Of like,
what's the NYU flavor? Yeah.
It's a little weirder. It's a little more like, feels like skews a little more art focused, but they also have like individual trends of like what people in the scene who hang out together. It's like how music evolves, like our like local music scenes evolve. Mm-hmm. Like it is people in the same space, like bouncing around off of each other, So I feel like there's a lot of people there who do like plunder, like plundercore kind of stuff over there. In certain pockets of that, of like, borrowed assets and that sort of thing.
The thing that I've definitely noticed about people that come out of NYU or other colleges in New York is that a lot of them seem to make what's the word for it? Like installation games for like museums or places like that. It seems like they kind of own that niche, at least in North America, and that's a niche that I think people who come out of other institutions don't even think about.
Right, because I bet there's probably pipelines over there of like getting students gallery space and like that kind of thing. That's like different than the pipeline of some other college programs, which is like, I'm going to get you into EA. I'm gonna get you like a game programmer job or something.
Yeah, I think that's also like super true because my experience with like most of the North American games programs is that's exactly what they're trying to do. Is they're very commercial focused, but they're focused on a very like the top 10 biggest companies. They're not even like how to get a job at like, you know, Double Fine or maybe not even Nintendo because like that doesn't rate high enough for them. You know, they're like, EA, that's what we're for. I noticed that you can definitely just talking to people, you can pick up who they studied with in the way they talk about games. But I haven't myself yet noticed that I can play someone's game and be like, oh, you studied under so and so. And maybe it's just that I haven't played enough of the right games yet.
Right.
But definitely in the way they sort of conceptualize them. I feel like different schools have different models, like a different relationship to formalism and stuff like that.
Yeah, there's definitely like a in a lot of cases like often a more structured to like a what am I thinking of, like a USC or something has like, you know, like, oh, this looks more like a puzzle game or more like, you know, it looks more like a video game in a lot of ways.
Right. Well, I wonder, I mean, Andrew, I know that like from some of the stuff I've read about Indiepocalypse, it is kind of genre resistant in that it's pulling in a lot of games from a lot of different sources, a lot of different backgrounds. But I also wonder, you know, it's on what, issue 56 at this point?
Yeah.
Do you feel at all like just by the very nature of having such longevity at that point that there is any kind of like, I don't know, traceable Indiepocalypse style that like, is there an Indiepocalypse style? Is there like an emergent quality to that's happening at all?
I think there's definitely things that are like, you know, more in my strike zone and you can see them like trickle through probably. But it's also like from sometimes it's harder maybe from the 10 to know like which one Andrew like hard slammed at the top of his approval list, you know. Though I can always tell you which ones in any given issue, which was I was like, oh man, oh my god, this is like how did somebody like, and I think of those as like, oh, it's the reason I do it, you know, because it's like some cases I look at them like, how would anyone find this game, you know? This person doesn't have social media or whatever. And would it get lost in like a more traditional, like, you know, being just submitted to game jams and things like that?
Yeah.
So like like you could like look at and like identify sort of like a bit of a style, and it is I try to very almost, you know, deliberately with each issue, things that are like very stylistically different from like not just like gameplay style, but like, you know, visual style, thematic approach, and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So that anyone can pick up any particular one and be like, oh, actually, games are like a huge, wide medium, and they're not what I thought they were.
I feel like that to me, that's one of the most important things. Is I want more people to experience a game that makes them say games aren't what I thought they were.
Right. Like my pitch to people at events when they say they don't play games is to say, this is just art in the shape of a video game.
Yeah.
But I don't know how often that works.
I think it's happening. I think it's working more and more. I think it's still a hard sell in some places, but it does seem like, in general, people from other fields are increasingly receptive to that.
And I am noticing anecdotally at events that like younger people are more attuned to just like they're more interested generally. There's less of a hard pitch I have to give on these kinds of things. Mm-hmm. And they're just like, oh yeah, no, these are just cool games. And I think part of it comes with like my running assumption is that having grown up with games having always existed as a medium rather than like seeing them grow gradually, especially
Right.
like these kind of like generational progression of things. People are like, oh yeah, no, that's just another medium, like movies, and movies can be anything. So can games, I guess.
Yeah, I think you're right on the money there. Yeah.
So you've got people more open to a lot of like different ideas and these sort of like, I don't know, like source texts of whatever, you know, these texts of like your Yume Nikkis and like your other sorts of kind of things. They're just like people are now playing games that are influenced by those, and like maybe not even knowing about the original things, and they're like, oh yeah, no, I really like this kind of game. Like, oh yeah, that is inspired by this and this and this, you know. People not even knowing and these kinds of things, and it's kind of like starting to trickle down into like future of design of like, you know, what were the early lo-fi 3D games? Could people even identify them at this point?
Right. Well, I think a lot about how, you know, increasingly because just things are not so easily accessible. The older that the game gets, that these references, even when they're like made very explicit, if they're explicit to something that isn't easily playable, they become like kind of mythological. I don't know. I was reading some people, I'm forgetting a lot of the context here, but people were talking about tracing the influence and themes of Undertale, which I think Undertale has, you know, such a wide player base, but I think there's like plenty of like younger gamers who also have like really gotten into Undertale, and the way in which so much of that game, I feel like Toby Fox has this influence that's coming from Earthbound and like his like old like fan edits of Earthbound, but then Earthbound itself being this like highly inaccessible game for so long for anyone to even, if they had not had it on a Super Nintendo when it first came out and they were maybe not super familiar with like emulation, it just being this like, what is this magical thing that existed that I've never played before kind of thing. I don't know. I think about that a lot.
I think that's a great example, and I think that there's also another kind of like inaccessibility there where like Earthbound is not a game that you can pick up and play casually all the way through. Like, as someone who also played a ton of JRPGs as a kid, like, and I like old, slow battle systems, I feel like that battle system is slow even by the standards of the day.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of younger people who would just straight up bounce off it, you know. So it's
when it's not, it's you know, it's in that weird space where it was also kind of experimental at the time. And so there's like multiple layers of it being unintuitive, and some of the like bits that are unintuitive are by design, but to recognize them as by design, you have to be familiar with like the time it came out. And then there's other things where it's like, oh yeah, that's just trying to play this in 2024 is just a total pain in the ass. And yeah, it'd be interesting to see someone. I'd love to watch someone play a game like that for the first time and just have them like narrate their experience.
Right. These things are almost like in a lot of ways kind of like, you know, that's probably every medium has like, you know, the quote unquote accessible version of the highly influential work, you know.
Right.
Like, you know, like, oh yeah, Earthbound's super influential, but Undertale easier to play, that kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's tons of like, you know, oh, and then he's like, oh, you can learn about those influences, and maybe you dip in, and you know, I keep saying that gamers gotta eat their veggies more, you know, they gotta really like try this sort of like, you know, like, oh, like run up against the awkwardness of something, and you know, if you need to use like emulation to like mess around with it and save yourself some time, give yourself some rewind, some save states, whatever. If that's what it takes for you to be able to get through something, try it in this purest form the best you can. But sometimes it's just convenient to be able to stop a game whenever you want and walk away instead of being like, I gotta get a save point, you guys. I gotta get to a save point first. And
any remaster of an old JRPG that allows you to like just speed up the turn-based battle or just reduce the experience of random encounters, I feel like goes in an incredibly far way to just preserving those things for future people to play them. I don't know.
Because it's like it's those internal questions of like that I think about a lot of, like, how much are you like this sort of like kinds of accessibilities versus at what point are you straying too far from the original purpose of the thing. What do they think the core idea of it is, or maybe to them the core doesn't have anything to do with there being battles every 7 steps. Maybe.
Yeah, that's a really good question too, because like when I was in my 20s and underemployed and with not very much social life, I read a lot of Victorian novels, and those were meant to take up as much time as they could. And like, so sometimes you'd read like this classic novel like The Count of Monte Cristo or something, and then like there's also the abridged version, and it's like, how do you feel about there being an abridged version? I mean, I think it's good. I think people should play the game you want to play. You should approach whatever the piece of media is in the way that makes the most sense for you.
Yeah.
But there's also like this double-edged sword to like, part of the experience of the Count of Monte Cristo is that it takes a really long time to get through. So it is like weird, like it's like if you're, because people talk about like, oh, that's Nintendo hard, but it's like sometimes when people say that, I'm like, do y'all remember like Atari 2600 games? Because those were so much harder, and they were harder in stupider ways.
Right.
And it's like, if you were to make a like easily playable version of some of those like Atari games, is that still the same game?
Yeah.
And to be clear, I'm 100% in favor of the easy versions. I'm just sort of saying it's a strange space.
Right. I'm generally of the thought that they should be additive, not like replacement things.
Right.
Like, it's like, oh, if you want to take this approach, fine, but like somebody should have like it's the equivalent of like, imagine if you were watching a movie and the remastered version has like a little ticker at the bottom where it's displaying all the themes as you watch the movie.
Right.
But those are the people are making those too. I feel like you turn on YouTube and it's like,
right.
Here, I'm going to take you through every metaphor in Citizen Kane in 5 minutes.
And I'm like, and it's like at some point you're doing yourself a disservice, and it's like, I think part of that is the broader culture of like, oh, we all have to understand everything, I guess,
Yeah.
You can't come away from something not understanding it, when maybe you're supposed to come away and think about it and realize things about it months later almost. Like art is not a there was I screenshot it because I liked it so much. There was a comment on a game I saw. Let me see where it is in here. Yeah, it was didn't get the hidden meaning, but I guess I won. and it's like underneath, like their let's play, and it's like a perfect encapsulation of like part of the way people are just interacting with art, of like, I defeated the art, also I made content out of it.
Yeah. I've been noticing that as a really recurring trend on itch.io, with the comments that are the comments are the links to the let's play content of the person making the comment.
Right.
and this
Right.
really like interesting like bounce back and forth between like I took your content, I made content that uses your content, I'm using the comment on your content as a link to my content, and within that content there's people responding to my content,
Being like, oh my god, if you like these kind of games, check out my game.
yeah, right, yeah.
And it's just content all the way down. If we're not producing content, what are we doing? We are producing content right now on the internet.
That's true. That's a very good point.
But joke's on you, I don't edit this at all except to take the music out so I don't get yelled at by YouTube. But it is like, right, because it feels sort of like... I think there's a video I watched recently. Weirdly, like there's an old Funny or Die video I ever watched recently, and what was it? Gangnam Style, of course, a Gangnam Style parody. Close parentheses. And there's a line in it. It's like, "Why did you make this?" And he's like, "Oh well, Gangnam Style's really popular, and like Star Wars stuff always does well." And he's like, "No, why did you make this?" And I think about that line. It's like a cursed evergreen video of like creating something, creating art or just anything for the sake of, well, it'll be popular, I guess. And what does it mean for like why do we make it for the sake of it having been made to be popular? And that thought keeps like repeating in my brain. It's like, oh well, why did you make this? And it's also very funny that in the related videos of that video, there is a very earnest, exactly what that video is making fun of having existed, of a Gangnam Style parody animation that I believe is full. It's like 3.5 minutes long.
Oh, great!
So I'm like, oh no, people are still like actually making this exact stuff, and it's to what end? It's a weird thing, but also I guess because you need money,
Right.
and that stuff makes money, and it's like,
So like, oh, go ahead.
no, I'll just keep going. Go ahead, you. I yield the floor.
Thinking of popularity and why do you make things, like my own little series, I made these 4 Yurivania games, and the very first one I made just because I really wanted to make something for Yuri Jam.
Right.
An important place in the way I thought about games. So I was like, I want to make something for Yuri Jam, and I was like, this is, I've been making games for years, but this is my first sort of like, it's my game and I'm doing almost everything, so it's gonna be bad. So I'm just making it for my partners. I just want them to enjoy it, and that's all. And then I posted it, and people really liked it. And like, if that hadn't have happened, I would never have made sequels. But then I was like, whoa, weird, I made this thing and people liked it. I guess I should make more of it. Like,
Right.
Which, I don't know that that's good or bad. It was definitely good for my ego. But, it is, like, popularity is such a strange thing to experience as an artistic creator.
Yeah.
And because also I say people really liked it, and I mean, like, I don't know, like 200 people. Which is
still a lot of people.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, it's tiny compared to like, what we talk about on social media, but it's 200 more people than I ever expected. So.
Right. Put 200 people in a room and be like, all these people like your thing. That's a lot of people.
Exactly. Yeah. No, it blows my mind every day.
Yeah, and that is right. But we've been like, our brains have been poisoned by like everything's just got to be bigger. It's like, oh, your game doesn't have 10 million concurrent players.
Right.
Like
you only have 10,000 concurrent players.
Right.
Get out of town, kid.
Right. The scale is like blown out of proportion of everything, and it's kind of like, I don't need 10,000 people reading what I say. Like, that's
right.
Too many people.
Yeah, I did. I guess I forgot to mention that Correspondence is also it is a live service,
Oh, okay.
massively multiplayer online inbox simulator, and our battle pass is dropping next week. So those of you get on it. I think I'm going to have some Windows Clippy skins in there
Oh,
for you to
perfect.
join.
I have. I did joke. I still occasionally, or not anymore. There was a time where I was jokingly thinking, like, could I ask Ash to put a dog in the Indiepocalypse launcher that he can pet? Like, just like the most vapid, insincere gesture that exists within modern game development. It is like truly like. It reminds me. It reminds me when I realized that Wikipedia started putting audience and like commercial reception above critical reception on their pages for movies, and
Oh, I didn't know
and go, what a sea change we've experienced in life. When did that happen? What were the talk pages for that? Because I feel like critical reception always used to be the first section,
Right.
and now it is all audience in like what are its numbers, and it's like the million little deaths of criticism and engaging with art. But who knows? I just think about fandoms all day. Got to join them. Got to be part of them. I don't experience art that isn't in a fandom. Because then how else would I be able to experience anything?
I feel like it's without an in group, like you don't want to be in the out group. So you
Right.
gotta if there's no in group, you got to make the in group.
I need to log on to Tumblr every day and see 50 fan arts of my favorite fandom to know that my fandom is still alive. But we're really, we got. Ooh. That was a private chat among my own friends. I was like, there's a message on there. But we are cresting. We are getting close to 2 hours, which is around when I try to wrap this thing up. So before we enter wrap up mode, Paige, Brennan, do either of you have any last pressing statements or questions or anything you need to get out before I start to get into wrap up mode?
Well, I'll just say that I played Correspondence, and I enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I took the time to play Eurovania as well, and I was.
Oh, thank you.
I had been very loosely fiddling with Game Boy Studio last month, and I think the moment where you get just really early on to navigating the polycule calendar issue, really just both I found very funny as someone who is also polyamorous and has to deal with calendars, but also just your implementation of like that calendar system within the Game Boy Studio system was just super impressive. That was really cool.
Thank you very much. That moment in the game was the origin of the game. I was like, this like juggling calendars. There should be a game like that, and
it really felt like that in itself could be a little genre of puzzle game. The polyamorous calendar scheduler game.
Yeah, I want to go back and explore this again without everything else I was trying to do in the game. Yeah.
Well, perfect. That is my other I think to myself and sometimes say out loud that even in the worst case, if like an Indiepocalypse comes out and nobody checks it out, at least each developer has 9 new fans. And that's the hope with the show. Like, I love the show. Like, it is what it does is it gets people in rooms together where, generally we would not be in rooms together. And like,
totally.
How else to be like, oh yeah, because personal recommendations go so much further than like 10,000 shares sometimes. like, I think these things go a long way. And I love when I hear people like, "Oh yeah, I played your game. I checked out your stuff before the show." Heartening
Well,
to hear.
it is very cool to just see a snapshot of like what people were making at the same time that you were making something,
Right.
and what the
Totally.
results of that are. Yeah.
Yeah, because there are like so many games coming out constantly. I've 560 games and nary a repeat developer among them. And theoretically no shortage of developers for the future. And it is this benefit of like, oh yeah, there's always people, they're always doing something different than me. And that's kind of like the excitement I feel of the indie space that is kind of unconstrained by, well, we've got to make a deck builder because deck builders are really big right now. Make sure you have your endless mode so that people will stick with your game forever.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I can just make a thing. It's the beauty of the hobbyist space that I think needs to get like respected a bit more. Also, like, I think in times of at times of constant industry collapse, I think having a healthy hobbyist space is also how helps people like not be like, oh, well, I guess I'm just going to leave making games forever.
Right.
It's like, well, I don't have a job I don't have a paying job at a studio, but there's like, oh, I can do like, oh, I can still table at like local events and stuff. I can still like work on small scale stuff rather than like the kind of like all or nothing of it all. With that said, before we go down a too long a road, Paige, Brendan, thank you for joining me here today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
I'll start with you.
It's been a lot of fun.
Yes, I don't work on the weekends, and I don't consider this to be work. So it's probably the only thing I do. So, Paige, if people are looking for your stuff, we mentioned where can people find it?
So, right now, you can go, actually, I just started making a new website. It's under construction, but it'll probably be done by the end of the month. So you can go to midnightpalace.gay.
Perfect. I'm going to grab that new, because also this is an eternal thing, This is not going anywhere. People might be listening to this 3 months from now when the website is fully constructed.
Oh, Paige,
Right.
Paige, I love that you do have the traffic caution signs currently under construction, which I think every website needs to have at some point.
Yeah, so my hope is that by the end of the month, like anywhere else that I am online, you'll be able to get there from here.
Yes.
Cool.
But yeah, right now it's like for real under construction. Most of the links don't work.
No, I clicked on a couple and it did not work. But I tell people, get your own damn website. At the very least, get your own URL and make it point to all your other websites. Because the web of someone else is perilous. Have your own web.
Yeah, I loved co-host and now it's going away, so
Right.
I don't want to point people there anymore.
Exactly. There was like these like how long these things just kind of collapse constantly, and they were never like, but like even if you forget hosting or whatever hosting thing you goes down, you just got all your code, you just put it somewhere else,
Right.
and then it exists as yours. But yes, that is midnightpalace.gay. Can you get to the games from there at least, or is that also?
You will soon be able to get to the games.
But you can get to your other older, simpler website, which has a link to the games there. So yes, you can do it.
So, yeah.
Yeah, mxashland.gay will get you there as well.
Yeah, and that one will also get updated soon.
Yes. So perfect. Brendan, your stuff, where can people get it?
Yeah, basically Bibliomancer.itch.io is where most of the stuff I'm working on related to games is. You like photos of hats and weird daily stuff, I have an Instagram that's alan.brendan. Sometimes I post game stuff there too.
Instagram is a weird one.
It really is.
Because it feels like I don't promote this show on Instagram because it doesn't feel like a live feed that people pay attention to, if that makes sense.
You're totally right. It is really, it is not a place I really expect much engagement at all, honestly.
Yeah, I expect most engagement in person now. That's where I get my engagement. Or I get more substantial engagement, and then I let the classic word of mouth. My strategy is both word of mouth and sheer persistence. If you last long enough that you outlast everyone, you just become the elder statesman. That's my that's my strategy. If I just stick around long enough, other people will be like, "Oh, didn't this thing always just exist?" I go, "No, I made it. I remember when I made it." Granted, its creation was not related to, actually, in fact, hampered by, but ultimately connected to, of course, the novel coronavirus. But so it is forever linked to my brain there, so I always know 100% when it started.
Uh-huh.
A perfect timing for this thing where I thought, yeah, it'll be great to bring this thing out to events. Oh, nothing for 2 years, at least? And then even then, it's kind of dubious sometimes for like another year and a half. And even now, it's like, that's life, I guess. Not great, but it's life.
The world's softest soft launch.
Yes. But it does do good at events. And what does good at events, folks? Indiepocalypse. You can get Indiepocalypse, of course, at indiepocalypse.com or just my itch page. If you search Indiepocalypse, you find the thing. I got good SEO at this point. Ignore the embarrassing articles that talk about there being too many games, and just go straight to me. If you'd like to submit a game, indiepocalypse.com/submit, and you too, like these fine developers here, could get that Indiepocalypse $20 payout followed by the Indiepocalypse like $30 to $50 payout followed by $5 to $7 US every 6 months or something to a year. It happens though, and then go, oh, look at that! I got $7.35. That says Indiepocalypse. Indiepocalypse.com/Patreon, and you could there are lower tiers where you can just get for $5 you get just commissioned games. If you're into that, you can get games physically, of course, either through indiepocalypse.com/tapes or pizzaprinks.com/tape market, and that physically being little USB sticks inside cassette cases. They look real cool. I'm pushing them hard because I think game developers need a cheap, affordable, easily made physical format, and those work. I think that's it, though. As always, if you think of a thing that I have, just do Indiepocalypse / that thing, and it's probably there. I do a lot of redirects. They're very handy. But that's it. That's everything. Well, once again, Brendan, Paige, thank you for joining me both here. Thank you for being contributors, and hey, audience, hey, thank you for listening. We're going to go now. Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye. Thank you.
See ya.